Hi, everybody. Welcome to the very first episode of the Grumpy Bunny. We've been having a couple technical difficulties getting things going this for my very first show. But without further ado, let's get started. And hi, my name is Derek, and I'm going to be your host for the Grumpy Bunny. This is going to be a nice food and lifestyle show. We'll talk recipes and how to cook stuff and everything that has to do with being around the house. But for the most part right now, food. I'd like to go ahead and thank iLogic Media for giving me a chance to have this podcast. And I definitely want to thank my executive producer, Johnny Danger, for handling all of the things that happen behind the scenes. Without him, I don't think we could have this podcast. So let's get started on that. This episode, our very first episode, so if I fumble a little bit, please excuse me, is going to be with my favorite chicken enchilada casserole. It's a family dish that I have known for my entire life. I have made it for years. It's my favorite. And my other favorite is going to be our granola, which we'll make a little bit later. Super easy, super easy. I mean, stupid easy. So let's get started with our chicken enchilada casserole. Hopefully, as we're gonna start with shredded chicken, I've gone ahead and I did cook off the chicken ahead of time, and then I shredded it. You don't have to do that if you don't want. As a matter of fact, I have something to show you. You can just as easily use a rotisserie chicken that you grab from the store. Just take the time, make sure it gets down to a refrigerator temperature before you take it off the bone. It works just as well. But for the purposes of this recipe, I'm going to go ahead and use this shredded chicken right here. So I've got about 1.5 to 2 pounds of chicken breast. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and add black olives, 2 ounces of black olives. You can get them in small cans, diced or sliced, doesn't matter. And then 2 ounces of green chilies. I like a mild green chili. I'm not a big fan of spicy food. They give me a little bit of heartburn. But if you do like spicy food, you can use things like the sliced jalapenos just as well. You just want to make sure that if you're getting them from a can, include a little bit of the juice into the dish. You're using cooked chicken means that it's going to be a little bit drier, so you kind of want to take what moisture you can, especially if it's going to be the juice of something like the chilies, which will provide even more heat and flavor. So I'm going to go ahead and give that a little bit of a mix up here. My gosh, it smells good. Hope everybody's having a good day today. I know that I am having a good day, and an interesting day. This is fun, right? So I have that mixed up just a little bit, and I'm going to add 2 ounces of sour cream. And then I'm also going to add some cream cheese. Let's put a little bit of that in there. It's about like that. And then some of this cream cheese here. Fun fact on cream cheese, it also works like butter. So the ounces will be right here on the side. I'm just going to cut this portion off right here. Toss that in there. I'm going to make sure that I mix this in really well before I go further. Definitely don't want to have any clumps of the sour cream, and I don't want to have any chunks of cream cheese. I do need that creaminess to be kind of mixed throughout, so I'll give it a good smash in here. Also helps, too, if you haven't really broken the chicken down as much as you'd like. When you're mixing everything in here, it kind of gets it all, you know, you've had a bad day or you're just a little angry and you just want to smash things down a little bit, but, you know, it's fine. Get out, get out that aggression, right? So, perfect. So, now that I have that mixed in here just like that, I'm going to go ahead and add my seasonings. I'm going to start first with chili powder. I'm going to use about 3/4 of a teaspoon. Fun fact, the teaspoon is actually a teaspoon, not a tablespoon. You can just toss that right in here. If this is something that you are a big fan of spice, you can always add a little bit more or a little bit less. It's one of the reasons why I like to use, in this recipe in general, using the cooked chicken, because it allows me to taste my dish before I am actually putting it all together. If it needs to be a little spicier or if I've gone a little too overboard, something like that, I can make the amends that I need to before I put it into the oven. So I'll take that in there, a little bit of pepper, some kosher salt. It's a lot of salt. Like a lot of salt. Just put that over here. stir that in here. And I'll give that a taste. Not gonna lie, if you weren't here, I'd probably use my hands. Good. So, one thing that I love is ground cumin. Makes a lot of dishes a lot better. It wasn't on the ingredient list because this isn't how my mom wrote this recipe, and I want you to have the original, but I love just a touch. So I'm going to add probably about a little less than a half a teaspoon in there. I'm going to mix that up. It brings a nice kind of dark, earthy flavors to this, which is one of the things that I really like. Almost a smoky kind of. Good to go. So a couple of things before we go on. If you did use a rotisserie chicken, which is perfectly fine, I'd probably wait to add something like salt, pepper, cumin, or any of the other than the chili powder until I've had a chance to taste the dish. There could be some seasonings that have cooked into the chicken itself, the rotisserie chicken at its time, and you definitely don't want to have over-salted or over-seasoned chicken as it's going in there. So that just so you're aware, like I said, if you are happening to use grab that chicken from the store, which is perfectly fine. It's one of the things that I really like about this dish is that you can make it as difficult as you want, or you can make it as easy as you want, going and using all fresh chilies and everything like that to using everything from a can. You know, one of the things that my mom used to make this for was when people had passed away. We would have, hats off to families, and we would always get just a little bit excited whenever we, let's just move on from there. So I've got all my seasonings in there, and I'm going to grab my cheese. You'll notice, if you had the recipe book, and actually we should probably step back. Hopefully you've preheated your oven to 375 degrees. If you haven't, you might want to go ahead and do that now. So now we're back to the cheese portion. I have a nice big thing of cheese here. You'll see in the recipe and in the instructions for that recipe, I said to portion out those cheese into 4 different portions. You want to have 8 ounces of cheese total, but in 2-ounce portions. I roughly use about 1 handful here, is about 2 ounces. But if you want to measure that out, that's perfectly fine. I'm also going ahead and putting in this cheese at the very last instant. I'm going to mix it into this mixture, but I'm not trying to blend it into and kind of lose the cheese into the chicken mixture. So if you're listening, you'll see that the chicken and the cheese mixture kind of just stay together but see separate. If you can see, you'll see how it's just kind of on the top. Not, it's all mixed through, but not mixed in. All right? So I'm also going to take a look. It looks like right here that I have a pretty good moisture content in my chicken. You may need to add a little bit more, some chicken broth, a touch of water if you need be, to make sure that the chicken mixture itself has enough moisture when you get to bake it here. I'm just going to make sure I have that all mixed in here, right? And I think I do. So now I've got my chicken mixture right here. I'm going to set this up here. I've got my cheese set right here. I'm going to set that off to the corner here. And I'm going to prepare my tortillas. The fun part and the messiest part of the whole thing. So I have my cream of chicken soup. Everything I'm using is gluten-free. I have something called celiac sprue, which is an allergy to, actually it's an intolerance to gluten. My body doesn't process this. So I'm using a gluten-free cream of chicken soup that's been condensed. And I'm using half of a can of the chicken noodle, of the soup. So I'm basically using half of that can, leaving it, the soup mixture, like a split pea soup. I'm not worried about trying to get the chunks out or anything too dramatic. I'm going to set that to the side here. I'm going to take my 8x8 casserole dish. And I'm going to lightly spray it with just a little bit of canola oil. The idea behind that is I don't necessarily want the tortillas to stick to the dish itself. And I want, and it just helps everything cook. Now for the fun part. So if you're doing an 8x8 tortilla dish, it's probably going to take you about 9 tortillas total. I'm going to split the tortillas in half, except for 3. And that way it'll be a little bit easier for me to put inside this dish. Well, hey, buddy. I have a dog here, and he's looking at me, all expecting, so. So I'm going to have these right here. The first thing I'm going to do is take one corn tortilla. I'm going to lightly dip it in this mixture. And I'm going to, for the 8x8 casserole dish, I'm going to place it right in the middle. Then I'm going to take my pieces that I've halved, again, lightly dip those in here, and place these around the edge. I'm bringing the edges of the tortilla around the edge up just a touch. I would say probably about a little less than a quarter of the way. And the reason why I'm splitting these tortillas up is that I do want to make sure that I have pretty good coverage across the bottom of my pan, but I don't want to have, large overlapping pieces of tortilla. It just kind of makes for quite a starchy meal here. So almost looks like a little flour. Oh. So as you can see, I have the bottom completely covered, a little bit up to the top here. Do my best not to overlap too expectantly. Then I'm going to take my chicken mixture, and I'm going to put about half of this mixture in here. So if you've used an entire chicken, you might have some extra. So I might suggest using the 9x13. It's okay to have a little bit of this left over too, especially if you're not planning on eating this the day that you make it. You can make quesadillas with some of the leftover corn tortillas that you have and cheese and use this mixture. I mean, there's so many things that you can do here. So I've gone in here, placing this. I'm just going to use my hands because this makes for easier working with. And in the end, I'm going to be the only one eating this anyway, right? So, well, that and my spouse, Chris, he'll probably eat some of this too. So I put some of that in there. See, brings it up a little less than halfway. Gonna wash my hands here for a second. And then I'm going to take a small handful of the cheese, or another 1/4 portion, sprinkle that over the top. As a matter of fact, while I have it, I have one in the oven that should be almost ready for me to take the foil off, which we'll talk about in a bit. Oh, look at that. Put that back in there. Thanks for your patience on that. So I've got the cheese and my first layer of the chicken. Again, I'm going to take one full tortilla, mix it, dip it in my mixture here. I'm going to put it right in the middle. I'm going to split these two tortillas in half. Again, placing them around the edges. So I'm not necessarily trying to get these to come up or around. I just kind of want to make sure I'm making a nice little shelf for my next layer here. And again, as you can see here, I have created another almost flour perspective, one full tortilla, and quarter tortillas around the corner edges like that. And I'm going to take the rest of my chicken mixture and place that right on top. Spreading this out, making a nice even thing, making sure that I'm bringing all my chicken pieces to the edge of this ring. Definitely don't want to, slice into this later and have a nice air pocket of nothing, Like that. Make sure I get all the goodness here. And then for my final, I'm going to make one top layer using, again, one whole tortilla, quickly dipping. Bringing this into the top like this. So yeah, growing up, man, this was my favorite dish. My friends actually asked me to make this dish quite a bit, although after having had to have eaten this now, I think for quite... Oh, you know what I didn't do? We got to take everything off. I'm sorry. 1/4 of our cheese here. My apologies on that. Can't forget the cheese. Now I'm just going to go ahead and put my enchilada top back on my enchilada casserole here. Just like so. So around this portion, I'm going to make sure that I get my tortilla to the edge. And then I'm going to try to tuck the tortilla into the chicken in the top. So it kind of gives it this almost rounded top to it. Okay. And then I'm going to take the last quarter of cheese that I have. Sprinkle that over the top. And then I'm going to take some of the condensed milk mixture that I have left over and kind of just give it a little bit of liquid on the top, just like that. Okay? Pretty easy, right? The last thing that we need to do is wrap it in aluminum foil. And put it in the oven. Now, like I said before, if you are not trying to eat this right away, this is a dish that you can sometimes make the night before and then kind of throw it in the fridge and then toss it in for dinner that night. I think it has a lot more flavor. It's had a chance for some of the seasonings and such to combine. But you can most definitely toss it straight into the oven from when you're finished with that. You're just gonna put it in there for about 30 minutes to 35 until it starts to bubble at the base of your casserole and the cheese is melted on the very top layer. Then you're going to want to take the aluminum foil off like you saw me do earlier, and you're going to want to let it cook for another 10 to 15 minutes until the edges of the casserole are crispy, that cheese has got a nice light crust on the top, and the whole enchilada casserole itself is bubbling throughout. So let's see where we're at right now. Through the wonders of television, through the wonders of not television, this is not quite done yet. So we're going to continue to let this cook as I go through some of my other stuff. We'll clean up. Some of the substitutions that you can totally use with this, if you want to use a dairy-free cheese, that's perfectly fine. I would make sure that you're using something that has a lower oil content so that you don't necessarily want anything to separate while you're putting it in the oven. You can also, like I said before, substitute hotter spices for this. You don't have to use the chili powder, but I kind of wanted to pay respects to the recipe as it was when we first had it. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this out, even though it's not done, so you can see what it looks like. I was hoping to have this all done and finished so I could dress it for you, but obviously being my very first podcast, I have failed. But you should be able to see, like here at the bottoms, that it has started to kind of bubble and crispify up at the bottom. My cheese is melted on the top. I would have liked this to have been a little crunchier to show you, dark on the top. It's actually okay to have that kind of almost crispy, crunchy texture. It blends real well with the creamy flavors of the chicken. So, again, I'm going to toss this back in the oven, and I'll have this a little bit later to show everybody. And that was my chicken enchilada casserole. Well, that was my almost chicken enchilada casserole. What did you think? Right? Fun. So we're going to take a second. I'm going to clear some things off. I meant to tell you, too, make sure that if you like the recipes that you're going, you can go to ilogicmedia.com and you can download all of the recipes for this episode. You'll also be able to watch any of our shows that we have for future. And if you missed this show, you can watch that also on demand. Make sure you take some time to check out some of the other things that iLogic Media has to offer. We have a lot of really great podcasts and videos and all sorts of fun stuff that I'd love for you to check out. So, all right, so let's move to granola, right? We've had dinner. Now we're going to have breakfast. So I love granola. Being a celiac, it's oftentimes really tough for me to find breakfast food that I could actually eat that won't make me sick. So a while back, I tried different recipes and different ways to make things. And I found a really simple and really easy granola recipe that works. It makes for very low-cost food, a breakfast cereal. I'm able to make sure that I know exactly how much sugar or other materials that are going into my granola and any of my food, which is one of the things that I really like. And I'm able to see what I'm putting in. And I can change it up. If I don't want something else, I can have it, a whole way. So let's get started. First things first, let's get our supplies. You're going to need maple syrup, rolled oats, brown sugar, some salt, vegetable oil, cashews, almonds, and that's it. The first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to use a large bowl to combine my oats. I have my granola or rolled oats here. I'm using the gluten-free oats, obviously. I'm going to use this my scoop here for 3 cups. Fun fact, you know that there's a difference between for dry, measuring stuff for dry and for wet. You should always use a cup like this for when you're using dry ingredients. And when you're using wet ingredients, you'll use this. So I have my oats in here. That's 3 cups of oats. You use 1 cup of slivered almonds. It's actually a little tough for me to find slivered almonds. So I actually have right here. That is not good knife safety, by the way, just so you all are aware. So I'm going to do 1 cup of almonds and 1 cup of cashews. So I'm using raw almonds and raw cashews. Just because when you buy them in the store, just because they say raw, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are raw. Cashews, for example, if they haven't been steamed and the husks pulled out, are actually poisonous. Did you know that cashews are also related to mangoes, which mangoes are actually related to pistachios? So that means that cashews, pistachios, and mangoes are all related? I didn't know that. But anyway, back to what I was talking about. I'm using the raw cashews, raw almonds, rather than using the roasted ones, because if I use a roasted nut, when I go to roast my granola, it's just going to turn my nuts into some sort of powdery, flavorless material. So raw's good, unsalted's even, raw, unsalted, perfectly fine. I'm going to go ahead and give that a little bit of a mix here. You also notice that you're going to want to add some coconut. I couldn't find regular coconut. I could only find a toasted coconut. And you really, again, want to use a raw coconut if possible. So you add that in there. One of the things that I love about this granola recipe, and like you will find in any of my shows, recipes, is that I absolutely love things that can be adaptable. So if you're not a big fan of cashews, don't use cashews. Use something else. You want to use walnuts? Use walnuts. You want to try flax seeds or quinoa, whatever you want. It doesn't matter. The thing that I would be aware of is that you want to keep your nuts to a specific size. If you're using something like a small flax seed or a chia seed, you may want to add those a little bit later in the cooking process. That way that the chia seeds and the flax seeds don't burn while the other stuff hasn't had time to cook. All right, so I have my almonds, I have my cashews, and I have my rolled oats. I'm going to go ahead and add some salt. 3/4 of a teaspoon. Again, if you're someone that doesn't really want to put any salt into this, you don't have to. That's one of the joys of that. And brown sugar. You can use a light brown sugar or a dark brown sugar. I made this a few different ways. You can use a really great, there's a sugar substitute that makes a really great brown sugar that you can use. That's perfectly fine. The thing that you want to make sure that you do is a 1/4 cup plus 2 tablespoons of this. And that's the same for if you're using a sugar substitute too. I found out that it turned out just as well using the same amount for both. I'm going to go ahead and give that a good mix here. Now, in a separate container, now I'm just going to use this liquid one right here. But you don't want to necessarily do these ingredients separately. You want to put the liquid in with the dry at the same time. So I'm going to take a 1/4 cup plus 2 tablespoons, which we'll do in a second. and then a 1/4 cup of vegetable oil. I'm going to use an olive oil. You can use the sunflower oil, canola oil. That doesn't matter. You definitely want to make sure that it is a oil that is good for both roasting and baking. And a peanut oil. So again, I'm doing a 1/4 of a cup of vegetable oil, which is going to bring in this container to a 1/2 cup. And then again, I go through so many spoons. 2 tablespoons of maple syrup. I did try this recipe using honey instead of the maple syrup. I found that it made a different consistency. It was okay. You may want to use a little bit less honey, and you have to use a little bit more vegetable oil. And at that point, if you're just using a good grade A honey, that works just as well. Okay, so I've got my dry ingredients here, and I have my wet ingredients here. You notice that like on the recipe, if you downloaded it from iLogic Media and the Grumpy Bunny portion of the podcast area, you'll see that I didn't add spices to that. I left that intentionally open for you. Some people may not like cinnamon. You may be a fan of different flavors. Try them, use them. My 2 particular favorites are allspice and nutmeg. I know, I'm a weirdo. When I just put just a little bit in. I will tell you, when it comes to flavoring your granola, less is more. You can always add more later on or something like that, but man, I'll tell you, add a little bit too much allspice and you can't take that back. Whew. I'm going to go ahead and mix that in here like so. So I'm going to take my wet ingredients, mix that in together. I'm going to keep mixing this until all of this mixture has the same even coating. I don't want to have parts of my oatmeal, the oats that aren't covered in this. I don't want to have, a chunk of this, stuck somewhere caramelizing into, gosh knows what. So when I'm finished mixing this, every single piece will have a nice, shiny texture to it. See that color on it? You'll see that it's still falling apart. It's not super wet, but you can tell. It's like it went tanning. Went to the beach. It's got it all. The beach. I don't know where you are, but it is 11 degrees outside today, and what I would not give for some beach. Some warmth. All right, back to our granola. So here's my granola mixture here. I have a pan. I'm going to take some parchment paper. If you don't have parchment paper, that's perfectly fine. You can use, you can just lightly spray down a cookie sheet, or even better, if you are going to use sheet pans, use a non-stick sheet pan. You're perfectly fine. I just kind of like using the parchment paper because it's less of a mess later on. So I'm going to spread this here. You may need 2 sheet pans for this, depending on how you like your granola. I kind of like a crunchier granola, so am going to leave my layer a little bit thicker than normal. So it should look like that, right? Be a nice shiny texture on there. I'll get all this stuff in here. And then I'm going to toss it in the oven at 250 degrees. I have so much stuff in the oven. So that's going to bake for about 1 hour and 15 minutes. Once every 20 to 25 minutes, you may want to go ahead and take a stir to it. You don't want the top layer to cook before the bottom layer, and it kind of just ensures the fact that everything mixes evenly. After it's cooked for about 1 hour and a half, or I'm sorry, 1 hour and 15 minutes to 1 hour and a half, you'll see that the color will change to it. It's got this nice, dark, rich texture to it. It's got great flavor. It's still warm. And your house, oh my gosh, your house will smell so good. So the difference you'll see here before, when I put it in the oven, that it was light, this light tan. Now I've got these dark, rich caramel notes to it. My cashews and my walnuts are perfectly, toasted. My and my nuts are warm. So that's my granola. One of the things I really like to do with the granola is I'll take something small like these little mason jars here, and I'll scoop it in here like so. Leave a little bit of room at the top. I'll cap it off. Perfect thing. I can just take some yogurt that I have. I can dump the yogurt right into the top of here, and then I can shake it. Or the same thing I can do with milk. I just pour it in there, and then I've got an easy go-to thing every day. These are good. If you put it into an airtight container and store it, you can store it for typically about 7 days. What I like to do is if I make big, giant batches of it, I will take it, I will put them in freezer bags. I'll freeze half of it, and then I'll store half of it. And then when I'm done, and that can last upwards of 3 to 5 months. So I fed you dinner, and now I've shown you how to make my breakfast. And, for my very first episode, I think we're almost done. I really hope that if you liked these recipes, that you take the time to go to, excuse me, and go to ilogicmedia.com and check out my portion of the podcast. Of course, check out all of the other podcasts that they have to offer. You'll be able to download the recipes that we did this week, as well as the ingredient list and some instructions for that. You'll be able to rewatch this episode if you'd like, and then you'll be able to see any of my other future episodes as well. Again, thank you so much to iLogic Media for giving me a chance to premiere this episode. And thank you to everyone who took the time to watch me on my very first episode. I know I may have fumbled through things for a little bit. I promise if you continue to watch, it's only going to get better. I do hope that you stay after the show for a Q&A where we can talk anything that you'd like. I will do my very best to answer all of your questions, whether they pertain to life in general or food or anything to do with substitutions or recipes for here. See me in a couple of weeks when we do pickles. We're going to go ahead and pickle every single vegetable on the planet. We're going to make dog treats for my favorite boy on the whole wide world, this one. And I'm going to show you what you can do with a sweetened condensed milk and a pan of water. So thanks again for seeing my show. Again, check out iLogic Media for all of the great podcasts that they have to offer. And thank you. Thank you very much, and bye. Do we have questions? Comments? Questions? Anybody? All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and turn off one of my cameras here. I don't know what to do. Thanks a lot, everybody.